To others, this may just seem like ordinary roasted corn, but to the man, it's a business opportunity worth millions. He discovered that people these days love spicy food. Even his 5-year-old son couldn't get enough of it. "Wow, what is this? It burns." "Stop eating it, dummy." "No, I like it. It burns good." This gave Richard the idea. What if French fries were dipped in chili sauce instead of ketchup? Would it create a unique taste? Richard was always someone who took action. He immediately went to the supermarket and bought various types of chili peppers, then returned home to start experimenting with new flavors. However, the process wasn't smooth sailing. His young son became his taste tester, and the family eagerly awaited his feedback. Hot. Like a lot of hot. Good hot. No, bad bad, bad. They didn't believe him at first, but they tried the chili sauce, and it burned their throats, making them rush to the water pipes to cool off. This wasn't the chili sauce Richard wanted. It was simply spicy without any satisfying afterburn, much like the artificial chili extracts made by unscrupulous vendors. However, Richard didn't give up. After countless attempts and improvements, Richard finally created his best version of spicy fries for his son. In that moment, his whole family became excited, and a globally popular snack was about to be born. It also shattered the stereotype that when people think of Mexico, they only think of Mexican burritos. Richard had always disliked burritos as a child. When his classmates ate sandwiches, Richard was discouraged by the burritos his mother sent with him. However, his mother didn't change his lunch. Instead, she brought a second burrito and told him, "When those kids make fun of you again, raise your voice and say that the chubby one didn't dare to try it." So he made his friend try it first. To everyone's surprise, the friend loved the burrito and couldn't wait to eat more. Richard didn't let the chubby kid try it yet. That's how Richard introduced burritos in school. The rumor spread like wildfire, and soon everyone wanted burritos too. Richard's savings jar grew fuller, although he didn't know it wasn't over yet. One day, he tried to buy an expensive chocolate at the store, but because of his ethnicity, the shopkeeper refused to sell it to him, suspecting that Richard had stolen the money. The police didn't give him a chance to explain, and Richard was taken away. The cold handcuffs restrained him and shattered his bright future. As Richard grew older, he went down a darker path, becoming a local gangster. He and his wife Judy lived freely and carefree. But one day, Judy found out she was pregnant, and with her growing belly, Richard became more awake to his reality. She encouraged him to turn his life around, not just for their future, but also for their unborn child. Richard eventually distanced himself from his old gangster friends. However, when Richard entered society, he realized that his past crimes made him as unwanted as a black coal walking through the snow. No one was willing to hire someone with his criminal record. Even after his second child was born, things didn't improve. His youngest son had to drink milk-flavored water, and his eldest son's shoes were falling apart and could only be repaired with gum. Judy had to shop and care for the kids at the same time while Richard continued to search for odd jobs. Finally, unable to bear the situation any longer, Richard contacted an old friend from his past. This friend agreed to help him find a legitimate job. The next day, Richard went to a food factory. To keep the job, he lied about graduating high school. However, his lie was quickly uncovered, and Richard was embarrassed. The supervisor decided not to continue with the interview, but Richard wasn't ready to give up. He asked, "Look, I'm fast, I'm smart, I may not look it, but I promise I'll be the best worker you've ever hired. Maybe I don't have a diploma, but I've got a PhD in being poor, hungry, and determined." The supervisor, seeing how desperate Richard was, understood that if a man is still holding on to his dignity, he won't be selling it cheaply. So, the supervisor gave Richard a janitor job and took him on a tour of the factory, showing him the areas he would be responsible for cleaning. Even though the job was dull and boring, Richard did it with passion, quickly impressing his colleagues with his enthusiasm. Over time, he became familiar with the environment, and the factory where he worked made French fries. Richard became very curious about the production process. Although he was just a janitor, he dreamed of working on the production line. However, the factory started to struggle as orders declined and the company's performance dropped. The CEO made a video to motivate employees, urging them to come up with ideas to help the company survive. Only Richard took this seriously. He started looking for a way to make a miracle happen, and that miracle came in the form of spicy fries. After many attempts, Richard perfected his spicy fries. When he shared the idea with his supervisor, the supervisor dismissed it as nonsense. A new product needs countless experiments, with the right proportions, done by our research staff over months. What are you, a janitor, daydreaming about? But Richard didn't give up. One night, he snuck into the supervisor's office, found the CEO's contact information, and called the CEO in Italy. The secretary tried to block the call, but Richard convinced her to pass the call along. He said, "I'm a janitor, but I have an idea that will revolutionize the company. This will save our jobs, save the factory, and help people who are just trying to survive. If you care about your employees, Mr. Rico needs to hear this." The secretary, empathizing with Richard's words, passed the call to the CEO. Richard explained that he had tested the product countless times and was confident it was the perfect Mexican flavor. He said, "I think it will save our factory, it will save jobs, and you said in the video, think like a CEO, so I did." The CEO, impressed, asked Richard to send samples, which Richard did immediately. When the CEO received the samples, he tasted them and was amazed. He immediately called Richard and said he wanted to meet him in person. The supervisors were worried when they found out what Richard had done and criticized him. But Richard's wife, Judy, supported him all the way. With her encouragement, Richard gained confidence. The CEO arrived at the factory, and Richard presented his idea for the spicy snack. Despite initial skepticism from the leadership, the CEO recognized Richard's potential. Soon, the company started mass-producing the spicy snack, which appeared on supermarket shelves. However, sales were slow at first, and the product was on the verge of being pulled. Richard realized the problem was lack of marketing. He turned to his old friends, who were skilled in guerrilla marketing, and they helped spread the word by handing out free samples. Through word of mouth, the product gained popularity, and sales surged. The factory was saved, and the CEO was so impressed that he offered Richard a higher position. Richard went from janitor to director of marketing. He called his wife to share the good news. Judy was overwhelmed with joy. Richard's success wasn't just his own, it was made possible by his perseverance and his wife's unwavering support. Richard's journey showed that with love, determination, and a willingness to take risks, even the most difficult challenges could be overcome. His story is not just an inspirational tale but a reminder of how perseverance and the support of loved ones can lead to success, no matter how impossible the odds may seem.